Now, of course, I can't speak for every investor out there, but a lot of you guys, as well as myself, are currently invested into SCHD or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, at least partially because of the fact that this ETF, over time at least, has paid investors more and more in dividend income, basically year after year. Now, this is so much to the point to where investors on average are getting paid around 8% to 12% more in dividends year after year with this ETF, at least since inception. But now, assuming that at least some of you guys already have a nice bag of SCHD shares just like myself, I currently hold well over 2,000 shares. The question is, how much are we going to get paid in the future when it comes to SCHD? And the good news for you is that I went through all the difficult math and basically figured out exactly what we should be looking at. So in this video, we're going to talk about SCHD's dividend growth rate, and again, how much we can assume at least that we're going to get paid throughout 2025 all the way over the next 10 or so years. So I promise you, if you hold onto this ETF, you're definitely going to want to stick around till the end of this one. If you are a dividend investor who wants to level up your portfolio, you need to be tracking your dividend income consistently. And that's why I created the perfect dividend tracker that I've used to scale my dividend income up to all-time highs over the last year. Now, along with this dividend tracker, you're also going to receive my A to Z dividend investing ebook, which shows you how I personally started from $0 several years ago to now where I earn over $7,500 per month in dividends. So if you want this tracker and the ebook, go to the first link down below in my description and grab it today. Now, before we go through the actual numbers of SCHD specifically, and I'm going to share with you guys how much we can at least assume that we're going to get paid in dividends this year, the year after that, and the year after that, etc. I want to go over something very, very important, and this is especially if you maybe are not all that familiar with what this means. I want to talk about what dividend growth rate actually means and share with you guys why learning about DGR or dividend growth rate was a massive, massive unlock for me personally as an investor. Now, it says the dividend growth rate is a percentage growth rate of a company's dividend achieved during a certain time period. Frequently, this is calculated year after year or annually. Now, unfortunately, a lot of investors, especially early on, don't necessarily know what dividend growth rate really means or how you can even find dividend growth rate, but it's very, very simple. You just basically take whatever dividend payouts that were paid the previous year, divide it by the current year, and that gives you how much dividend growth has now happened. So for this example, let's say this is ABC Corp, paid its shareholders a dividend of $1.20 in year one and $1.70 on year two. To determine the dividend growth rate, you have to then use this formula. So the dividend growth for this example, this is kind of an extreme example, but it'd be around 41%. Now you can see right here another example. If a stock or ETF paid you, let's say $1 per year, your number two $1.05, your number three $1.15, the dividend growth would be 5%, 9%, etc., etc. So the reason I found dividend growth rate to be super important is because, again, the idea of buying into something like SCHD, for example, which, like I said, I currently have over 2,000 shares of, and then holding onto those shares long term and getting paid more and more in dividend income year after year, that can turn even a small portfolio into a massive one, at least theoretically speaking. Now, although there's tons of different stocks and ETFs out there throughout the market that have offered some pretty impressive dividend growth rates. Looking at this chart right here, you can see this is SCHD's, for example, the percentage change from the previous year. Now, these dividend payouts are on a quarterly basis. So basically, ever since SCHD started trading, this is back around 13 or so years, you can see that most years, this ETF is increasing their dividends anywhere from 8% to 30% to 3%, but again, averaged out to around 10 or 11%. Now, if you take into consideration the fact that SCHD as of right now pays around a 3.6% trailing 12-month dividend yield and has a dividend growth rate of anywhere from 12%, almost 10%, and in the long term, 11+%. This can create a massive, massive component effect in your portfolio. Again, just based off of previous numbers, we cannot, of course, say for certain that SCHD or any stock or ETF for that matter is going to continue to pay out what they paid out historically, but just based off of previous numbers and track record, SCHD has a boatload of dividend growth to offer. Now, this brings me into my current situation, and I am going to give you guys a few different examples of what this could look like for you and how many shares you currently own, so stick around. But as of right now, across all my portfolios combined, I currently have 2,352 shares of SCHD, which as of right now pays me around 99 cents per year. This is based on the trailing 12-month payouts, which equals around $2,328 or around $194 per month on average. Now, side note, I do want to give you guys this SCHD dividend calculator that you can go ahead and type in your own information, mess around with it for absolutely free. It's going to be down below in the first link in my description. But basically, I built out multiple different scenarios, sort of a worst case scenario, a 7% dividend growth rate, which SCHD, at least for the most part, has offered much more dividend growth than that, which is based off a 7% dividend growth rate. 2025, we're looking at $1.06 for my portfolio, which means I would have a nice little bump in dividend income throughout this next year of around $160 per share. Now, over the next several years, based off of a 7% dividend growth rate, we're going to still see some nice sized dividend growth over time, especially because the 7% compounds year after year after year. Now, so much to the point to where if I never bought another share of SCHD again, remember I'm currently earning around $2,300 more or less with the shares that I have. In the next 10 or so years, I could be getting paid $4,500 plus. Now, let's say SCHD pays a 9% dividend growth rate. That means that year after year, we're going to see at least a little bit more of a bump as far as the annual SCHD payouts, and also that's going to translate into more and more income to the tune of around $500 to $1,000 more on an annual basis if, of course, we just have a small bit more of dividend growth. Now, on the other side of things, let's go ultimate bull case. Let's say that SCHD raises their dividends from here on out 12% year after year after year and really becomes the dividend king of all ETFs like we kind of know it as. That means that this year we're looking at $1.11 per share per year, or $2,607, which is a massive increase compared to my previous $2,300 plus that we'd be receiving off the current annual payouts. Now, this also means that over the next 10 or so years, we're going to see my dividends grow at a very, very fast pace, again, because this is based off a 12% dividend growth rate. Now, just because I'm sort of a conservative investor, I always kind of expect things to not necessarily be as good as they can get. I'm probably thinking that SCHD is going to continue to pay maybe 8% to 10% on average as far as dividend growth goes year after year over the next 10 or so years. Now, this means that I can probably expect, based off of the current shares that I have, to pay me almost double the amount in dividend income over the next, say, 8, 9, 10 years. Now, the reality is that I'm going to also continue to buy more and more shares of SCHD, which is only going to juice this process even more and offer more dividends, more dividend growth, and everything else. Now, for those investors out there that maybe only have 100 shares of SCHD as of right now, based off an 11% dividend growth rate, which is basically what we've seen since inception, off those 100 shares or so, you're currently earning around $99 per year in dividends, or around $8.25 on average per month. And even with a relatively small portfolio, only 100 shares, you're still going to see your dividend income more than double over the next 10 or so years based off this 11% dividend growth rate. So again, the idea is that over time, as you buy more and more shares of an ETF like this one, or like many others, of course, that continuously pay you more and more in dividend income, reinvest those dividends into more and more shares, you can understand how the snowball effect can take place. Now, for that reason alone, SCHD offers massive exposure to dividend growth for investors, along with upside potential for the actual price of the ETF, but I'm not necessarily as concerned about that. And honestly, even on the lower end of things, I'd be thrilled to see this ETF pay us 9% more year after year in dividends, because again, over the long term, that's going to add up significantly. So how much is SCHD going to pay us in dividends over the next several years? Well, that of course depends on what happens with the future dividend growth of this ETF, but if one thing's for certain, the historical dividend growth rate for this ETF has been outstanding. So much to the point to where, once again, almost every single year, almost every single quarter, besides a few here and there, this ETF has offered massive double-digit dividend growth, which has made many investors extremely, extremely rich. So now that we talked about how much this ETF, SCHD, is going to potentially pay us in the future in dividend income, that is, I lastly, most importantly, want to hear from you guys down below. Which dividend growth ETF, if any, are you currently using to build out a similar position that I've done with SCHD? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.